issues.
Like your blazer.
Without the audio, that wouldn't work. If we stream now without an audio, like without sound, do you think that would work? Then we can connect the sound.
Yes? Do you have the iPod?
Okay, can I use it here? Perfect, thanks.
Well, hopefully it will last longer. So, can I just have everyone's attention here? So we cleared this space. We'd like all the athletes to sit on the floor here. The chairs behind us. Top of the squad.
It's been about 13 years since I've been
Actually, I think this is the first time I've been able to do it in 3 years.
All the coaches are sitting on the chairs there.
I feel like that should really have
Coaches are sitting there.
Excuse me, big fella. We're really got a nice seat here for that phone.
push the exit button.
Style pertains to what, but you can just fiddle around with it. It could be this one, it could be
That was what happened last time. That was what happened last time with the TV.
Hello? Alright. Tanshi Kiwa, Nicole and Dej Nakash, Amit Mia. Hello everyone, welcome here. My name is Nicole. I'm the coordinator of Indigenous Student Programs, 1 day a week at CMU. So I'm just here, I'm going to be bringing around a smudge. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what smudging is and how to do it if you'd like to participate. So many First Nations and the Métis people across the prairies use sage to smudge. Smudging is kind of a cleansing and grounding ritual that you can do. And the act of smudging is prayer. You can also pray in your mind when you smudge, but it's also just the actions that are prayer. And so I find the easiest way to explain smudging is to explain it through prayer. So I'll tell you what I think about or when I smudge. So when I'm smudging, I bring the smoke over my head and I ask Creator to give me good thoughts and a clear mind. And when I bring the smoke to my ears, I ask that I would hear good things and I would hear the teachings of Creator. I ask that I would see good things. And I ask that I would speak good things when I bring it to my mouth. And then I bring the smoke down my body, and I ask that I would walk in a good way and tread gently on Mother Earth. And then I bring it to my heart, and I ask that my heart would be good and that Creator would live in my heart. So feel free to pray in whatever way you feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable smudging, just politely tap the bowl like that, and I'll pass you. If I can't reach you, just try to scooch over a little bit, and I'll bring it to you. Like the guys, you guys might want to scooch forward a little bit, because I don't think I can fit through there over there, but we'll make it work. So, yeah, and then while I'm bringing the smudge around, Russ, the athletic director, you guys all know, is going to be up here kind of explaining the event and the inspiration for it.
All right. To begin, I would like to welcome all of you to this event. Members of our varsity volleyball and basketball teams, our coaching staff, and an especially warm welcome to Treaty Commissioner of Manitoba, Loretta Ross, and Elder Harry Vaughan. Dansi, Anin Buzu. Before we go too far into the program, I invite all of you to stand together with me. We gather together on Treaty 1 land. These are the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and it is the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge that for generations, these treaties have not been respected. We commit ourselves to walk along this path towards reconciliation, to decolonizing our historical narratives, our minds, and our hearts. We walk this path with humility and gratitude to the First Nations people, past and present. Please be seated. Today is a unique opportunity for all of us to listen and learn. We have come here today to talk about treaty. Why here? Why now? As someone deeply involved and invested in sport like you all are, I am aware of the way that sport and the voices of athletes can steer and help facilitate social change. We are here to unveil a uniform, true, but it is so much more than a uniform. It is a uniform that we think will spark deep and meaningful conversations. By wearing these uniforms, we seek to honor treaty and the first people of these lands. And it is our hope that these uniforms will facilitate meaningful dialogue and will help establish a more just and equitable society. Before we get to see them, however, we want to learn, and we have some very knowledgeable guests with us today to guide us along this path. Later on in the program, the artist will be joining us, Amber Green, and that will be great to be able to show her our appreciation. Then we will enjoy food and drink. First, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Treaty Commissioner Loretta Ross.
Is it okay if I sit?
Sure, yes.
I just don't want everybody's necks cranking up and getting sore on me. I'll come down a little bit. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having us here. It's certainly a pleasure and an honor to come and be invited in this wonderful ceremony and unveiling that's going to be taking place. As mentioned, my name is Loretta Ross. I'm originally from the Hollow Water First Nation, which is on the northeast side of Lake Winnipeg. It's about a 2-hour drive from here, and I spend a lot of time in my community, and I still think of that as my home. Winnipeg is my secondary home, and my kids, I'm the mother of 4. All of them are graduated from high school now, and they're all urbanites. They're all city of Winnipeg. They've grown up in the city, so they consider Winnipeg their home, but they also know about their history. And it's important that we know our history, regardless of where we reside, whether it's in the city of Winnipeg or you venture somewhere else beyond. I think Winnipeg will always be your home if this is where you were born and raised. And it's that connection to the land and the places that we grew up that's important. And it's important for First Nations people. And if you think, when you've taken, many of you now, like what are you guys, grade 11, 12, 10? Oh, these are university students. I don't know why I was thinking you guys were in high school, you all look so young. Okay, different hat here, different thought. But if you think back, while you're in university, but even when you were in grade school, let's take a look there. How many of us have learned about treaties in the classroom? Let's put our hands right up so I can see. So that's wonderful. You know, and even if I look at the older folk, the teachers and the instructors in here, ask them, how many of you took treaties in the classroom? And you know, you see the generational difference. And I'm going to say to the teachers, you did take it. You did take it. We all took it. And the reason that maybe you don't remember is because when we took it, there wasn't a lot of value placed on the treaties. There wasn't a lot of time spent on the significance of the treaties. There's more significance and value placed on the treaties today, and so we have a generation of people who are a little more familiar with what the treaties are all about. In my generation, and probably the generation of professors and teachers, is that what we learned about treaties were that the First Nations, treaties were entered into with the First Nations people, and the First Nations people gave up all of their land. They gave up all of their land to allow for Canada to develop as a country so that settlement could happen, that they could build a railroad from coast to coast. All of those reasons are what I was taught in school. And how many of us have heard that version of the treaties? Right? Have you heard a different version of the treaties? We've also heard that, which is the First Nation perspective of the treaties. And for years and years and generations, nobody paid mind to the First Nation perspective of the treaties. And I think if we look at our society around us, we see that's a reflection of that exactly. That if you only focus on one side to a story or a relationship, everything gets focused on that one perspective. And the other is forgotten about, and the other is devalued, right? We pay little attention to that. And if we look at the country of Canada and what it's built on, it's all built on that one perspective. And your challenge as young university students, your challenge is to question that and to make changes. What I want to do with you is I brought with me a treaty medal. How many have seen a treaty medal before? So I'm going to ask Russell, if you're okay with it being circulated, I'm fine. I want people to take a look at it, and I'm going to go on this side. If one of you young gentlemen can come up and grab it and take a look at it and circulate it, would be wonderful. And I want to spend some time on this treaty medal. This treaty medal, oftentimes when we think about the treaties and the treaties in Manitoba, we focus on the written text. And as we were talking a little bit earlier, and Russell was sharing with me, that's one of the first places people go, where can I read it? And if you go on our website, you can read it. But what I want you to do is to focus on the treaty medal. Because the written text represents really the Crown's version of their understanding of the treaty. The treaty medal represents a First Nation perspective as well to the treaty relationship. And so these medals were given from the Queen's representative to the First Nation leaders as they entered into the treaty-making process. And the treaty medal themselves have a history. There were various medals that were given to the leadership to represent the relationship, and there were many medals that were rejected by the First Nation leaders saying, this doesn't represent what we're agreeing to. So we reject it. And so there are a couple of versions, and so the one that's going around is one that was accepted. So I want to tell you what's in that treaty medal. In the treaty medal, and as you see it, you'll see two gentlemen facing each other, face to face. And they look quite athletic, actually. They're quite muscular looking. Certainly the First Nation one is, because he's bare-chested, right? All the First Nation men were bare-chested back in 1870s. That's a joke, by the way. And so, but the point is they're facing each other, and they're equal in stature. They equal in appearance in terms of size. You don't have one that's tall and one that's short. You don't have one that's big and one that's small. They're entering into this relationship with each other on an equal basis. They're the same in the sense that they're coming in on equality. Of course, we know that same isn't always equal, right? But they're entering into this relationship on an equal basis and on an equal footing. The land that they're standing on is equal. Again, we don't have one on a hill and one down below looking up at the other. They're facing each other eye to eye. And that's the basis in which the treaties were entered into, is that equal nature, respecting each other and what you're bringing into this relationship. The second thing that you'll notice as it goes around is they're shaking hands. And what does shaking hands represent to many of us? Peace. It's a greeting, right? There's peace in that. Often you don't shake someone's hand that you're really not interested in meeting. Often it represents an agreement. We agree to this. We're settling on this. Yes, let's shake hands. So peace, agreement, trust, all of those are tied up in a handshake. Much the way we think of handshakes in 2021. Much of that symbolism is in that relationship. So they're shaking hands, they're agreeing. And between the two gentlemen, you'll see a hatchet or an axe. And that has a story as well. And that represents the fact that there'll be no violence against each other. They won't take up arms against each other. They will forever maintain peaceful relations. So the hatchet is between them and is not to be lifted up. And so if we think of the residential school experience that many of us are learning about and the violence that was perpetrated on the children, we see that there's issues there with that promise, right? That promise has been broken. And that's an example of one of the promises broken. So that hatchet is a very important part of that relationship, that peace, maintaining that peace. You'll also see in the background, you'll see elements of nature, which is the sun. It's difficult to see, but there's water. And then they're standing on land, which is grass. And that represents how long this relationship is to endure. For as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the waters flow. And that's forever. And even if you take a literal translation of that, the sun is shining, well, maybe not today, but the sun is there, right? And the water is still flowing, and we're still walking on grass. But for First Nations people, there's teachings behind that, and those are significant elements, not only of how long this is going to last, but the sun represents the Creator, right? One Creator for all of us, no matter what. The sun represents that creation, that Creator who brought us together and has witnessed this relationship. Right? The water are the waters that flow not only just on the earth, but for women is a significant part of First Nation beliefs. And women are the life givers. So as long as the women can give birth and those birth waters are flowing, this relationship is enduring. And of course they're on the land, which represents Mother Earth. Right? If we were outside, that's where you would be sitting. You would be sitting on Mother Earth, who benefits all of us, who we have to look after. So all of those elements are part of the First Nation understanding of this relationship. So it becomes bigger than those two gentlemen facing each other. It's all inclusive. It brings everything into this relationship. And for First Nations people, that's really important. You'll also see in the background behind the First Nation gentlemen, you'll see teepees. And teepees represent the mode of life, the way of life of the First Nations people. In this relationship, they didn't surrender that. They didn't give that up. Who they are as a people and their beliefs and their customs and their languages, their history, all of that will endure in this relationship. And the parties were to ensure that occurs. And so when you look at the treaties and the treaty relationship, the treaty metal really reflects what that relationship is. Right? It's to last forever, and we're to work together to make sure that we all benefit from Mother Earth and what she offers to us. The other thing about the hatchet that I forgot to mention was in sharing the land, and there's a big difference. First Nations belief, if you understand or you take what I just shared with you about the Creator and waters and the land, you'll start to understand that First Nations people, there's no way that they would give up the land because they're so tied to the land. They're so connected to the land. How do you give that up? Right? So if you look at the written text of the treaties, one of the first things that it says is the Indians, because that's the term that referred to First Nations people at the time, the Indians hereby cede, surrender, and yield up. And then they go on to describe some of the lands, right? Cede, yield, and surrender are legal words in the Canadian legal system or the British legal system at the time. And that's what it refers to, surrendering the lands. First Nations people don't have a concept of surrendering the land because they are part of the land. So you have these two different worldviews on this relationship and how they're going to share the land. So from a First Nation perspective, it's sharing the land. From the government's perspective, it was a surrender of the land. And so those concepts have yet to be reconciled, right? And as we're talking about reconciliation, that's part of the conversation. And the more that you understand, I think you will also start to understand when you see things in the news, in the media about First Nations people perhaps protesting, First Nations people litigating, you start to understand why that is and the perspective that they're coming from. Quickly before I lose my thought on the hatchet, and it goes to sharing the land. The hatchet also represents, and there's other representations that are not on the medal that are talked about in different treaty areas, but the hatchet represents the amount of land that was to be shared. So the amount of land that was needed to break ground for farms, that's the amount of land that was to be shared. Nothing deeper than that. So when we think of mining, when we think of all of those other things, those were never contemplated to be shared, certainly not in the way that we see them being utilized today. So considerably significant differences in worldviews. And you know, that's one of the things that in 2021 and beyond, that's your challenge, right? That's your challenge in terms of how do you make those changes? How do you bring it together so that people can live well? There's a great Anishinaabe word, and it's a word, but it has a lot of meaning. It's Mino Pema Tsuin. Say that with me. Mino Pema Tsuin. Mino Pema Tsuin. Mino Pema Tsuin. And you know what that means? It means to live a good life, to live life well. And in doing that, I'm not talking about being, a millionaire and living richly in that sense, in the monetary sense, but it's living well on these lands, right? Caring for the land, caring for your neighbor, because it's not just you. As First Nations people, they view everybody as a relative and somebody that needs to be cared for. So Mino Pema Tsuin is a responsibility that we all have to ensure, not only that we can live well, that we can live a good life, a healthy life, but that our neighbor does as well. And so that also connects to the treaty-making process, because it was a sharing of the land so that the newcomers at the time could live well here. Many are escaping and continue to escape places of danger. And this was viewed and continues to be viewed as a safe place. And so that Mino Pema Tsuin was extended. Okay, you need a place to live, you need a place for a new life, to escape persecution somewhere. You can do it here. We can do it together, but that needs to be reciprocated, right? That needed to be reciprocated as well to the First Nations people. And as we know, if we look at the history, it didn't always happen. And when we look at 2021 and we look at First Nations people and we see them perhaps in the North End, more often than in other areas, we wonder, why is that? Why is it they're not benefiting the way that we are, or the way that you are? What has to change? Why is it different? And we have to start to understand those differences, because that treaty relationship, as we know, endures today. Right? It's not something that happened in 1871 here in Treaty 1. It's something that continues even now. And so part of it is understanding what that responsibility is, because it's a responsibility. It's not necessarily to be benefited from it. Your parents, your grandparents have no doubt benefited from it. And now we have to think of not only the benefits, but how we can ensure others can also benefit from living a good life, living well, right? And that's going to happen in many ways. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. I'm going to share, because I see Elder Bone looking at me, and wanting to have his turn. And so I think, well, I'll turn it to him and we can come back and however else you want to do it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. As an elder, we're always grateful to be invited to come to speak to young people like yourselves, because the future is in your hands to make sure that the teachings of all our people, the skills that you acquire in your lifetime. Sports is a good sport. It requires teamwork. It requires all of us as a team. Different positions, different talents, and also but what I want you to remind you is the spirit in you is what's important. Sometimes we often wonder why some athletes are greater than others, why athletes are just average, and why some are people turn professionals into other things. The reason is that the inspiration, the spirit within you is guided by your desire. Your desire as a team, that is desire to reach a goal. So that's why symbols are important. I know to have later on you're going to have a design, of your visions and of your hopes as people and as in your sports. What's important about those symbols tells us a story about who we are, the dreams, and the visions, and the hopes, and how we're going to accomplish things. I want to remind you that the treaty 150 years ago that commissioners mentioned was about relationship, was about all of us working together. So treaty in Anishinaabe words simply means a go ikiwin. That means that we'll share this great land together. We'll benefit this great land together. Everyone that comes here, besides First Nations people that were here first, from people all over the world, they'll be their home. They'll be their place. So they can follow their dreams, their hopes, and their desires to make a contribution to what we call nation building. Canada's become a great country, the province has become a great province, the resource that it has. But for all of us, we still have that desire and that relationship, and we're still not equal. Some people are not, some people are greater. But I think for all of us, I think why sports is important because in the eyes of your coach, everybody's equal. You may have different talents, but we have certain goals. The symbol that commissioners mentioned about the treaty medal, it's about looking at the horizon, standing where you are now. That journey that you make over there is the journey that you have here. But for us, I think, as Russell mentioned about acknowledging the land that we have here today, that just to make reference, to remind ourselves, this land one time belonged to First Nations people, now is shared by everybody else to make their home, their place of comfort. So I think, it's a shared responsibility, shared obligations. So I think that's why symbols are important. Also, about the land in our traditional people teachings tells us a number of things. One of them, of course, is to protect, and to preserve, and to promote the value of the land. As you probably know, that one of our Greek teachings is about is the air that we breathe, water that we drink, the climate around us, all the natural environments. That's very important to us. As you probably know, because you're going to be the generation that's going to facing the future. The challenge that we have, of course, is climate change. Climate change, is a man-made event. Man-made. That's why we're in a mess right now. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink. It's man-made because of the wealth, the greediness that happened to some people. So I think for all of us, we have to keep that in mind, and because it's your generation. Can you imagine ever living in your time, your children, your grandchildren, that this land is not suitable for any more life? So that's what treaty was all about at the beginning of the outset, is to protect this land, to make sure that looked after the way it should be. Yes, we agreed to a lot of things. One of them is farming. One of the things that we know that was part of our treaty, as the commissioners mentioned, and that symbol that she showed us was about the natural resources. The natural resources was not mentioned in the treaties. That's the reason why, the government of the day in 1867, we're the first group of people who are mentioned in the Constitution. It simply means, in Section 9124, the ones that know your history. This simply tells us that the Indian people were here, that was their land, and we shared its resources. That was what treaty was all about. But shortly after, when the government of the day followed the dreams that the commissioners mentioned, railway from coast to coast to declare sovereignty, but immigration, people from all over the world to come and settle here, what is now Manitoba, to come and share this great land. But they also had a responsibility to make sure that their government, the Canadian government as we have, are supposed to fulfill the obligations according to our treaties. So that's what's important for all of us. But you see, there was an underlining thought, even 150 years ago, about the government, thinking that we'll find a way not to honor the treaties. You see? And I can shape you where the thought came from. The thought came from, of course, all the news you probably will hear in your studies, is that doctrine discovery. They said North America was an empty land, there's not people here. Our people were not considered people at that particular time. That doctrine discovery is based on papal bulls, a Roman Catholic doctrine, saying that, if you're not Christian, then you're not a person. As you probably know that from your studies in the Bibles and all those kind of, it says that Christianity is important, but Christianity was also built, to be might, to be stronger, to conquer, that kind of stuff. See, if you trace that backwards, 150 years ago, there was already an underlying thought about Canada, about the provinces, about First Nations people. See, that's why it's sometimes very difficult to talk about those times, about those towns, but we have to be honest with ourselves. Your institution is built on honesty and the truth, is built on values, belief systems. So I think, sometimes telling the truth is very difficult. But going back, to that team effort, the symbolism of team, it's important that, you keep that focused, because, as I said before, sometimes, we have great teams, great athletes, guided by our coaches and our managers and the crowd as well. But for us, I think, it's a team effort, right? Everybody's got a responsibility. So do we here in this room. We all have a responsibility. So we come to you, asking you, as young people, into the future, to keep in mind the relationship that we had here at the beginning of time, 150 years ago, was to share this great land. As the symbols, by the treaty medal, we bought these treaty medals to emphasize how symbols are important, because we knew that the design of your teams are going to be unveiled here sometimes later on. But I think what those designs represent is about your team, about your collective efforts, about the desire to go beyond than what you can do ordinarily. So that's that team effort. So I think the symbols are important, designs are important, because we all have that's the look around. Even the name of your institution here, 3 letters. Those 3 letters have an important meaning there. So for us, I think as athletes, this is also important for us to make sure that we do those kind of stuff. So that's what treaty was about at one time. We work as a team. Let's benefit this great land. So I think something terribly very happened. Just shortly, I want to mention to you, because it's in the news media right now, the situation about the unmarked graves of young children through residential schools. You often wonder yourself, how can a group of people, in their human spirit, do this to some people, other people, very young lives, without knowing it, just destroying it. Hope that they will forget that. See, that's happened to us and because the government, they introduced what they call legislation called the Indian Act. The Indian Act, of course, was introduced, nothing to do with treaties. After the Indian Act was introduced, residential schools were introduced. The purpose of Indian residential schools was threefold. To deny us our languages, to deny us our history, and above all, to deny us our relationship with our parents. That family relationship that you experience every day as you go home to your parents. That relationship was lost for us no longer at the beginning of our time. In other words, what the government's intent at a particular time was, of course, was no longer, well, let's destroy these people because then we don't have to honor the treaties. Let's find a way that they become like us. Those words that they used at that particular time was no longer civilization and assimilation. Assimilation to the greater society, and at that 150 years ago, civilize those savages, meaning us, until we don't know what they are. But sometimes these are honest truths that we need to talk about. But as you probably know, that your parents, your grandparents were raised in a different generation. But society today has an attitude to think what is the real truth about our people, about these great nations. There's an appetite to know that knowledge. Whether you believe or not in what happened in the past, but I think it is to the next generation is important. So that's why we come. That's why the Treaty Commission was established. For three reasons especially, is public awareness, public discussions, that's what we're doing here today, to make sure that we understand that, because you're the generation that's going to shape our into the next world. So that's why it's important for us to remember who we are as First Nations people and who you are as an individual. So for us, that's our source message that we want to provide to you. But I just want to go back a bit, what Russell introduced about the land, this great land that we have here. You hear that concept, you hear that when you go to a Bombers game, you go to a Jets game, you go to other institutions, the universities and colleges. Welcome to the original lands of the people. And they named, of course, the Dakota people, and Nishnawbe people, Cree, and the Métis people as well, because they were here 150 years ago. So that's why they're acknowledged. The reason for that is just simply to acknowledge this great province, this great nation, also involved those groups of people. That's why, just to remind ourselves, their history is just as important as anybody's history. And I just want to go back, to the smudge that was given to us. We have a sacred teaching behind that. It's actually a sacred breath, because in our teachings, one of the commissioners mentioned that the sun represents our creation. The sun is not the creator. It's beyond that. The creator is beyond that. But the sun is the one that we see visibly every day. But the energy of the sun, the energy of the fire that it produces. So in other words, when we have sacred fires, it reaches over there. It reaches to the smudge bowl that was given, that fire. So for us, when you inhale that fire, that smudge, it's a sacred breath, meaning not all the way to the Creator to hear, to give us that strength. So what you breathe then is actually a sacred breath, to enhance who you are in your heart. Remember the spirit that I was talking to you about? It's to awaken the spirit within you, to make sure that you make those choices in your desire to be a good athlete, and better athlete, or just average athlete, or just to be there. But those desires come from you, from all of us. So I'm grateful that we've been asked to come and say a few words here. As the commissioners mentioned, we do have an elders council here representing the Treaty Commission. As you probably know, here in Manitoba, there's 5 major speaking groups. The Nishnawbe group, which I'm part of, the Creek group, the Dakota Creek people, the Dene people, and Yellowknife people, and of course the Métis Nations as well. So they're all represented in that perspective. So our role as elders, not because we're getting old, but our role is to protect the languages of our people, to ensure that our teachings are still very much alive, and to tell the history in the truest form as it is now, to tell the true history of our people. So that's why we come. That's why we're part of that journey. So I've been traveling with the commissioner for a lot of times. We've been all over the place. And we reach out, to teachers. Almost three-quarters of the qualified teachers here in Manitoba have heard us through the teachings for our people, how to teach the classrooms, lesson plans, that kind of stuff. But I think, but it's your will, it's your hope, it's your spirit that'll guide you where you want to be. So with that, I want to close you with that thought. You need to touch yourself, spirit in all of you. You can't blame anybody else to reach the high things that you want to reach. It's got to be from within you. The coach can only guide you to that, and the professors. So with that, Ichimi, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are going to wait a little bit. I think that the artist is still coming today to join us, which is Amber Green. And I would love to take a little bit of time if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, or if they have anything that they'd like to say about this whole project. I wanted to have some spot for an open mic, if this might be an appropriate spot. And then there's going to be 4 athletes that are going to be showing the uniforms for us. So those athletes, maybe you could go to the back and get your stuff ready. And then hopefully, I hope that Amber will be here, and if she isn't, then we'll just go forward with that one. I wish I was as gifted as both of you are speaking from my heart. I always have to write things down, and I'm always nervous to speak publicly. Would anybody be willing to share a little bit if I take this microphone off? Anybody wanting to have a moment to speak? Anyone? Well, I'll speak briefly. I come from British Columbia, and we don't come from a treaty in British Columbia, and so this is really unique for myself. My educational process didn't teach me much about treaties at all, and it's something that I really appreciate about being in Manitoba, now that I'm learning more about treaty. And in some ways I have a lot to learn about what went on in British Columbia. And so, yeah, that's something unique in my own journey of being in this place now. Anyone like to share or ask a question? No one? Okay. Chloe? You do? Okay, great.
Yeah, you're probably going to get thanked on behalf of many people just individually today, but I just want to say on behalf of athletics, I guess specifically our women's volleyball team here, this has been wonderful. This is something that I think has probably been long overdue. And yeah, we just have so much gratitude for you coming to this place and sharing your knowledge, and it's hard, but it's so necessary. And so, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
Did you attend a residential school?
I did not. I'll tell you the reason why. I was raised in the 50s and 60s. I was born at that time. But in 1951, the Indian Act that I referred to, the major was revised in 1951. There was an option for us either to attend a residential school or not. There was a local school in our area. We can go there. But before 1951, it was against policy, in fact against law, to speak the languages of our people, to speak the ceremonies of our people, to conduct the things. It was against the law for us to assemble, against the law to have counsel, a lawyer to represent us prior to 1951. See, that's residential schools. The one I want to mention to you is my own personal experience. My mother attended residential school, so did my father, so did people not my generation. My mother came home very, very sick from abuse, from sickness, from residential school. So she lasted only 1 year. Just at the time I was born, she died from her experience from residential schools. So did my father, died at Nanette Sanatorium here from TB when he was 26 years old. So as a result of the residential school, I did not have a parent, mother or father to raise me. Not like anybody else in here. I will never have that experience about having a mother, having a father, brothers and sisters. So that particular time, my grandparents were gung-ho, that saying, well, we will not send you to residential school, we now have an option. And that's the option that I had to attend residential school. I'm not into the school in my area, that's where I'm from, so that's my experience. But I'm very knowledgeable about my experience because in the 50s and 60s, we are allowed to speak in the language of our people, to do the ceremonies that we do here, to talk about openly about our history as well. So as I was raised most so my first language is Schnabel language. English is actually my second language. And I did finish high school there in my area. I came to University of Manitoba, went to graduate school, and became a leader in my own community in other forms as well. But so right now I'm an elder. Like my experience is also like these residential schools that happened to us, that happened to us and the generations following. So I hope I answered your question. Good.
Great. Everyone, this is Amber Boone, who did our design for it. Treaty Commissioner Loretta Ross. Great, well this is perfect timing. Well, without any further ado, are the students, just hold on 1 second. Further ado.
Okay, well, I'll say something while they're busy back there. My name is Jamie Menzies. For those of you that don't know, I coach the women's volleyball team. My family is also Métis, and I'm very honored to have listened to you guys today. I just wanted to acknowledge, and I'm sure we all noted, the grace with which you spoke to us today was inspiring, and I think that what the subject matter that we were talking about is one that can conjure a lot of anger and hurt, as there was a lot of harm in the past, and I just wanted to acknowledge the grace with which you shared your message, and it was with forgiveness and hope and a path forward, rather than, layering guilt or causing further harm, perhaps. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you for that.
Do you have music ready? Oh, this is it. Okay. Okay, well, we're not going to have smoke and lasers, but you can if you imagine those things. So let's have Okay, I have a little bit more written, so I'll read it, and then we'll give us a bit more time and make more sense. Before we have some of our varsity athletes come out to introduce these new uniforms, I'd love to give a bit of a background on the journey we've traveled that has led us to this day. When it comes time to plan new uniforms, we study and carefully consider lots of design elements and trends in preparation. What would we keep? What would we change? Colors, stripes, logos, fonts, all have become part of our CMU identity. Trending across the National Basketball League for the past several seasons was the City Edition uniform design. Each team has their regular home and away uniform, along with a third, City Edition design that often showcases unique artwork and colors, along with either the city's nickname or a piece of history related to their state. This idea started the wheels turning for us about our location and our identity, and what things we may be able to do to promote reconciliation. I mentioned the idea to several of our athletes who were studying. What do you think of the idea of doing something different on our home uniforms this year? About the idea of recognizing Treaty 1? It was instant approval and support. People began imagining what it might look like and potentially the impact it might have as people engage in meaningful conversations about treaty. We're so pleased to have Amber with us now, and I was introduced to Amber through my friend Don Monkman. Don works with Amber at Manitoba First Nations Education and Resource Centre and recommended Amber for this project. We are very grateful that he did. Amber was easy and enjoyable to work with, as were our athletes, Tammy Mitchell, coach Jamie Menzies, and staff Nicole Ternoweski and Christy Anderson that I consulted to help steer the direction of the art. After sharing Amber's patterns and options for artistic direction, the feedback we received was clear, and Amber began to add the chosen patterns in several ways. You'll see that the graphics create new colors for the CMU Blazers and give space for new words, and in turn, what has been pieced together will grow the identity of our programs. As long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows. Music. How old school are we doing this? This is really old school. Look for this microphone. This is old school.
Is that working?
We're going to have music by Treaty 1 artist Boogie B. And let's start. We have representing our women's and men's volleyball programs. Number 10, Brooklyn DeJong. And number 14, Josh Corbisky. Across the chest, the words Treaty 1 are prominent, over a muted floral pattern and held on top and bottom by two red lines taken from the prominent red line that runs horizontally across the Treaty 1 flag, representing the First Nations people. The back of the uniform carries the muted floral pattern into the CMU wordmark, and below the number, a bright prominent floral pattern with the words, as long as the sun shines, grass grows, and rivers flow, spanning across the hem. Perfect. We have representing our women's and men's basketball programs, number 3, Reina Reyes, and number 9, there is no mistaking the bold floral patterns on both sides of our new basketball jerseys. Bright indigo, red, white, amber, and evergreen flowers frame the new style. Muted floral patterns give depth to the color with bright amber numbers. The left leg of the shorts features a large sun with 7 rays, taken from the flag of Treaty 1. The 7 rays representing the 7 First Nations in the territory and the year 1871. Like the volleyball uniforms, the reverse side of the basketball jerseys note the phrase, as long as the sun shines, grass grows, and river flows along the hem. Good on top. Perfect. Thank you. We have some gifts that we would like to give on behalf of our athletes to the Manitoba Treaty Commission and also to the artist. So I'll just wait first. So first presenting our volleyball uniform to the Manitoba Treaty Relations Commission. We have Brooklyn and Josh. And presenting our basketball uniform to our artist Amber Green, who is Pacific and Vernon. We're really excited Our volleyball teams, for most of you will know this, but for our volleyball teams, our home opener is this coming Friday. Where we'll host the University of St. Boniface. And for our basketball teams, it's really an honor to be able to take these uniforms to British Columbia this week when we'll be playing in the Lower Mainland. Yeah, so this is, I don't really have much for the conclusion. Amber, would you like to speak about it?
Hello, thank you guys so much for the warm welcome, and I just want to thank CMU and Russell for this vision and working with me and allowing me to be a part of this amazing opportunity to represent the land that you guys will be playing on, and it's really neat. This is one of the 3 different designs that we are working with the floral pattern. And my inspiration was actually taken from the late Elder Victor Harper, and I worked with him a lot at my full-time job at Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. And he talked a lot and was like a huge advocate about learning off the land and incorporating that into our school system. So I thought that was a really awesome opportunity because he would show these amazing floral patterns and just tell us about the representation of the land, the water, and the flowers, and like the roots and everything too. That like all these different life lessons that can come from that. So I thought that was really neat that I could incorporate that into a design that a school's gonna wear. So thank you again for this opportunity, and go Blazers!
We have catering that was supposed to arrive at 5, but we're 4:59, so it could happen any minute. I'm gonna, what we'll do is allow you to have some time to just hang out for a bit until the food arrives. And if you have questions for any, oh, yeah, something, yeah.
Can we get a picture with everybody? Like not
Yeah.
necessarily everybody, but like the jerseys.
Yeah, let's do that. Please. If anyone would like to take photos, let's do that. That's a great idea. Yeah. Let's find a place that's great to take these photos.
Actually, was it?
Sitting positions 20 times.
Count it?
I wasn't sure if the table was strong enough to lean back.
Yeah, it kind of.
Yeah.